Evidence suggests that they earn more, they have more friends, they're less prone to disease. Why? Partly because sometimes taking that risk won't pay off. If you don't ask, you don't get, be that partners or promotions. But it is also that if you think you'll live to a ripe old age, you're more invested in keeping yourself in good nick. If you believe you'll progress in your career, you're more motivated to try harder. Of course, how much you show your optimism varies from place to place. In Finland, for instance, people have a saying that goes, if a stranger smiles at you, they're either drunk, mentally ill, or an American tourist. As the Western world celebrates a new year, events around the world can seem overwhelmingly sad. However, New Year is a new opportunity to the optimist. And the first step towards fixing the messes we've made of the planet is the mindset that we can. So I'm raising a glass to the mass delusion that is our global optimism bias.
Marley Chesterton. And we here at From Our Own Correspondent will be sharing more stories of hope, fear and much else besides in the 12 months ahead. I hope you'll be with us, and we wish you a Happy New Year.
From Our Own Correspondent was presented by Kate Adie and the producer was Paul Moss. Now, brace yourself. Lord Sugar's coming.
On BBC One.
The Apprentice is back. The theme tune, the deal closing, running in heels and the power posing. The wake-up calls, awkward hugs, Lord Sugar pointing and the cafe mugs. The you're fired, Karen sighing, not forgetting the receptionist and the panic buying. Deadwood, dodgy puns, even Tim from Series 1.
The Apprentice, next Thursday night at 9 on BBC One and iPlayer.
BBC News at midday. Experts leading the battle against coronavirus have paid tribute to their fellow scientists after being recognised in the New Year's honours. Knighthoods have been given to the UK government's chief medical advisor, Professor Chris Whitty, and his deputy, Jonathan Van Tam, who described his role during the pandemic as the greatest privilege of his professional career. More than 70 Olympic and Paralympic athletes who competed in the Tokyo Games were also recognised. Tobias Weller from Sheffield, who's raised more than £157,000 for charity, has become the youngest person ever to feature in the New Year's honours. The 11-year-old who has cerebral palsy and autism is to receive the British Empire Medal.
It feels absolutely amazing to be honoured by the Queen. My nan told me about the honour on Christmas Day, and I thought, wow, as you can imagine, I'm chuffed to bits.
The former Prime Minister Tony Blair says it's an immense honour to be appointed a Knight Companion of the Most Noble Order of the Garter by the Queen. It's the oldest and most senior British Order of Chivalry. The state funeral of the South African anti-apartheid campaigner Archbishop Desmond Tutu has taken place at St George's Cathedral in Cape Town. Archbishop Tutu died last Sunday at the age of 90. Only 100 people were able to attend this morning's service because of COVID restrictions. Delivering the main eulogy, the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa described Archbishop Tutu as a crusader for freedom and equality.
Such was his stamina, such was his commitment to social justice for all, that he took up the cudgels on behalf of millions of people around the world. He never stopped fighting, he never stopped speaking out, and he never stopped caring.
The Health Secretary Sajid Javid has said that further COVID restrictions in England must be an absolute last resort, despite rising case numbers in the UK. Writing in the Daily Mail, Mr Javid said the UK was going to live alongside coronavirus this year. Yesterday, UK daily COVID cases reached another record high of almost 190,000. Matthew Taylor is the Chief Executive of NHS Confederation, which represents the health service in England, Wales and Northern Ireland.
I hope we had a great time last night and remember, last night NHS staff worked through the night in these very difficult circumstances. They're coming up from 2 years of intense pressure. And it's really important that we're not complacent. We're not complacent at the level of policy and also not complacent as individuals.
A 14-year-old girl has been killed in a road accident involving a suspected drug delivery in West Midlands. The teenager was struck near Rowley Regis railway station
there's one lane closed on the M6 heading north from Junction 1. That's the Rugby turn into Junction 2 for Coventry because of an accident. And a reminder that the M42 between junctions 9 and 10 has reopened this morning following roadworks over the festive period. And on public transport, buses are running instead of trains on West Midlands Railway services between Birmingham New Street and Tamebridge Parkway because of engineering works. And that's your travel from BBC Radio WM. We'll have more in half an hour.
American actress Betty White, who's died at age 99. Her career spanned 9 decades and she was due to celebrate her 100th birthday later this month. BBC News.
With the best bits from a year of the news quiz in half an hour here on Radio 4. But first, here's Felicity Hanna with a special edition of Moneybox.
Hello and Happy New Year. What are your 2022 resolutions? Giving up chocolate? Maybe a bit more exercise? Or perhaps you're on a mission to declutter your home and potentially make some money in the process. After all, we all feel a bit strapped for cash after Christmas. Today, on this special edition of Moneybox, we're going to look at the perks and the pitfalls of flogging your unwanted stuff. And that includes any unwanted Christmas presents. You know the kind, the gifts that you're so touched to receive, but quite simply don't want. Well, let's start by hearing from Simon, who got in touch with a Christmas confession.
I was given a Christmas present by my dad. It was an in-car coat hanger kit, which is really handy if A, you've got a car, and B, you've got coats to hang up. And I had neither of those things, and neither did my brother. And he was given one too, so we had a pair of in-car coat hangers. You can imagine my face, it didn't excite me. Do I sound really ungrateful? I don't mean to sound ungrateful, and I'm ashamed to say. I checked the price of them online, and then listed them online to sell them. I made £4.50 for each one, and I did confess this to my dad later. I don't want this stuff lying around the house, and when I see things like this, I go, yeah, this is pound signs looking back at me. There's got to be a good couple of £100 made from selling the presents that I'm never going to use. Don't tell anyone.
Simon, we won't, but listening to Simon are today's panel. I'm joined by Dr. Fiona Ellis-Chadwick, retail expert at Loughborough University's School of Business, and also by Naomi Willis, who co-founded the Skint Dad money-saving blog with her husband. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So Fiona, Simon sees pound signs when he looks at his unused stuff. Are we a nation of seller-honours?
We are increasingly becoming a nation of seller-honours. We have got into the second-hand market more and more, and there's lots of reasons why. It's not just about decluttering, it's about sustainability, it's about moving from fast fashion to slow fashion, and slow fashion is all about vintage and the vintage markets and getting much more use out of things. And from that, what we've seen is a whole proliferation of marketplaces online to help us do it. Vintage, Country, ASOS Marketplace, loads of different places.
Loads of different places. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But Naomi, did Simon arguably do the right thing? He sold on his unwanted present. Now someone else can use it. That might not be what his dad wanted. Do you think flogging gifts from loved ones is okay?
Personally, I don't see a problem with it, and I would do it, and I don't have that issue at all. Whether or not you tell them, that's another question. I mean, obviously he's saying he did, but he might not tell other people, so he's obviously got a good relationship with his dad to go on and do that. I think the difficulty is whether you do it in January or not, because everybody else is going to be doing the same thing, so the marketplace might be a little bit cluttered.
Oh, does that mean that January is a great time of year for finding a bargain?
I think it'll be a better time because people just think, oh, I could get rid of that, or I can do with the extra money. So there are more listings for unwanted gifts, so you will have a chance to find something.
Fiona, £4.50 for his in-car coat hanger. Some people might think that is not much cash, considering all the effort you have to go to sell it.
Yes, and I agree with you, and there is a lot involved in selling things online. Not only the costs of whatever platform that you're selling through, the packaging, so it takes a lot of effort for £4.50. However, if you sell a number of things and you don't just look at it as an individual item, you perhaps look at it as selling 4 or 5 items, and some of those yourself for a bit more, look at what you get at the end of it rather than a single item. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing these days.
Naomi, how do you decide how much you're going to charge for anything?
Well, I try and look at how much it was originally, how much I've used it, or I've not used this at all, and see if other people are selling similar items on other platforms and how much they can make for it, and go in then with a bit of research to understand how I'm going to try and sell it and see how it goes. I mean, if after 3 or 4 days there's been no interest, then I might look to consider reducing the prices.
So is that the tactic? Should you start high and be ready to reduce?
I mean, if you go in too high, you're just going to put people off, and if they want the item, they might keep an eye on it and see you reduced it, so they can try and barter some more. So I think you just need to be realistic about what you get. I mean, if you're looking to sell something sentimental and you're putting it very high, it's probably because you don't actually want to sell it if you're going in too high. So I just think you need to be realistic about the pricing.
Oh, think about your motivation. Well, Emma's been in touch with Moneybox. She says, I've sold on Christmas presents, which were the wrong size or not to my taste. I've even asked my hubby if he minded, and he was okay with it. He'd bought me a dress, which was the wrong size. There is definitely a market for old things, which you may think have no more use. I've sold on old VHS and cassette players for £40 to £200. Fiona, selling on a dress in the wrong size is an option. Surely, it's better to try and return it first.
Well, you can do that, and many stores these days have gift receipts. There's no requirement for a retailer to take something back because it's an unwanted gift, so you might need to be careful depending on where you're actually returning it to. But there's a lot more fun in trying to sell it. One thing I would say, if you do try to sell particularly fashion items, don't forget to give really good and detailed sizing, because one of the things about selling online is getting returns. So just like an ordinary retailer, you might get stuff back as well. So the more details, the more stuff that you can give people, the more insight. So what you want to happen is that you want to not disappoint somebody, you want to delight them when that parcel drops through the letterbox.
Needs to be as described.
Thank you very much. Will has tweeted us to say, worst gift ever was a plastic drinking roulette wheel with 16 shot glasses. We'd not long had a baby, so the thought of using such a naff contraption at any point was unimaginable. I took that one to a charity shop before the decorations had come down. That is another option, of course, isn't it? You can sell it, you can always pass it on to a charity shop. Now, if your 2022 resolution is to make more money out of unused stuff, then here's an idea. Alan's been in touch.
We advertise 2 spaces on our drive when we're exits at hospital, and it brings in extra income. We're able to have that bit extra to either go to a restaurant once or twice a week, the extra holiday, and also the grandchildren. You know, we normally rent one at £5 a day. Most of it is people visiting the hospital. We have made friends with 1 or 2 people that we keep in touch with. The people that we've had on our drive, they've been nice people.
Alan, thank you very much for telling us about that. Naomi, the fact that you can rent your driveway is going to be news to a lot of people. What else can you rent?
You could probably rent out just about anything. I mean, if it's your own home, you could rent out space in your garage if people need to store things, or in your attic. I think you can even rent out your entire home to be used as a film set if there are going to be something going on in your area. But people rent out all sorts, even if you have, say, a hedge trim. You might not be doing so much hedge trimming at the moment, but during the summer, instead of somebody buying one, they can rent that off you for a small fee.
What do you need to know? What are the risks about doing something like that?
I mean, you've obviously got a risk that somebody takes it and they won't give it back, or that they return it and it's broken. So you need to weigh in how much risk do you want if that does happen. But I think if you do it through a site like Flat Llama, there are help that they can give you to kind of cut that off.
There is a website for everything now, isn't there? Fiona, we can rent out our stuff. There's also an increasing number of places where people can rent things like dresses or outfits instead of buying them.
Yes, and this is an area of the market which is growing quite significantly. I mean, one of the great things about the internet, you can love it or replicate it, same with social media, but it's bringing us together, and there's so many different business opportunities whereby me being in touch with you gives a platform the opportunity. So there's a couple of companies that I've been looking at, Buy Rotation and Hire Street, and what both of these companies do is allow you to lend and rent your clothes using an app, making it very simple. And what we're seeing now is that this is becoming the norm. So it's being acceptable for us to wear vintage clothing, and celebrities are getting into this. There's a big growth in the wedding dress hire market, and actually it makes quite a lot of sense because wedding dresses can be incredibly expensive garments, and what happens to them afterwards? So if it can get more use, and this kind of buys into those trends of where society is more and more going these days, is around the sustainability. So yeah, it's a big and growing marketplace.
When you talk about vintage, not everyone's old clothes will feel very vintage. Vintage sounds like something quite chic from a few decades ago. What about just second-hand stuff?
I think there's a marketplace out there for almost everything. So if you've bought something, and so long as it needs to be in a reasonable state, it doesn't need to be an old t-shirt that perhaps you wash the kitchen surfaces or the car with and then got, I'll sell this. No, that's not going anywhere. But I think that functional utilitarian items have also got a place in this second-hand marketplace. You probably, for lower priced items, are going to actually be reselling them rather than renting them. The rental market, you're dead right, is looking for those, high value, more chic designer pieces. But I think there's a place for everything.
Now, I should say, of course, with all these money-making methods, it is important to check what your tax liability might be. So, for example, HMRC told us that renting out a car parking space is covered by the rules relating to property income, with a tax-free allowance of £1,000. But buying and selling stuff like clothes, that's covered by trading income rules, with, again, an annual tax-free allowance of £1,000. Do check, though, for your specific situation, because you don't want your extra income to come with a surprise bill. Now, if you do feel bad about selling all your stuff, then as we've been hearing, you can at least comfort yourself that it's more sustainable. Let's hear from Melanie.
A couple of years ago, I took a pledge to be more sustainable with fashion, which meant not buying new clothes. And through that, I came across the Vinted app, a bit like Instagram really, that you upload photographs, a description of what you're selling, and people can scroll through and find it, and then you can make a purchase through the app. And on there, I'm very quickly and easily able to upload the clothes mainly that we don't wear anymore. It's really quick, easy, and simple and free to list. And one of the great things about Vinted is that the buyer pays for the postage and you just get a prepaid label once they purchase. So that makes it much more easy too. And then over the last year or so, I've made about £500 selling on winter clothes.
I mean, 500 quid for clothes you're not using anyway. That is pretty good. Naomi, Melanie is using Vinted. You've given us some other ideas, but where else can you sell? What should you look for in a selling site?
I mean, for me, there are some marketplace sites that charge quite a lot to be selling. So you're having the fees of listing it and then PayPal fees added on. And when you're selling things that are quite cheap, I think it can be difficult to think you're going to make any type of profit. And I know if it's your own stuff anyway, the profit might not be there, but you want to try and make sure you get as many pennies as you can back. So you can try things like Depop, Pre-Loved, the Swap app. They can also be useful to part with your things.
With so much choice, though, over selling sites, how do you pick the right one for you?
I think you've got to have a look to see if there are people locally to you who are using it. That can help you cut down on things like postage costs, because you then don't have to go through the rigmarole of heading off to the post office or potentially getting lost in the mail. So I find that quite a useful thing, looking at somewhere like Pre-Loved or Gumtree, to know that there is somebody local to me who would be interested in an item.
Naomi, does it make sense to find the most appropriate place to sell something? So if you've got designer clothes or kids' toys, do you have to find the right website rather than just flogging it on social media?
I mean, social media is great and it's had a real burst of marketplaces on there, but it can turn into a bit of a car boot sale. There's all sorts. And there are now a lot of commercial sellers on there, which does make it a bit confusing about, are you buying from somebody who's just trying to part with something, or are you buying an item more brand new? So I definitely think it's worth having a look and seeing, does it look like other people are selling these items? Otherwise you might just be listing for nothing and it doesn't sell.
Fiona, you're actually an old hand at eBay, aren't you? Have you got any tips?
Yes, one of my biggest tips actually, and it sounds like a negative, well it is a negative, is don't react badly to requests for returns, because what we have to realise is once we go online is that we actually become seen as sellers and we get feedback. So, you know, we're marked on our performance, marked on our packaging, marked on what our goods look like. So that can be quite a, I didn't want that.
I mean, how do you not take that personally then? If someone doesn't like the way you've packaged up the item, or if they don't agree that, you know, the item is in the condition you said it would be in?
You really do have to stay very calm and be very professional about your response. Ask them, what is it that you didn't like about it? Would you like to return it? Here's how you return it. Don't ever get involved in, you know, a sort of an online slanging match about, you know, whether you think that it's right or not, because that's just not going to work. But over the years, I've sold lots of things on eBay. I started off actually, I inherited my granddad's train set. It was huge, and what I wanted to do, I've got my own special set which I kept, which are my memento. But my granddad was the sort of person who he didn't want things to be just sitting in a cupboard, and so through eBay, do you know what? I had some real heartwarming moments where people told me about, you know, this little truck's now with its running mate, and my granddad would have been delighted.
Naomi, you've got a very frugal mindset. Do you buy clothes this way? Is that how you go and look for a new outfit?
I have looked to buy clothes online. If I'm looking for something very specific, I will have a look at some of the apps to see is it available and have a bit of a search to try and find it, which is particularly with my kids who want specific merch and all sorts of stuff that I don't get. But I will do that. But I actually quite prefer going to a charity shop or going to the vintage store and actually having a look around, because I quite like to touch the items and be able to kind of have a real look and see what they feel like. Because it is a bit of a worry that I don't know what the item's going to be, as I say, when it's posted through, which is why I think being very careful if you are selling items to put quality photos up there if there are issues, do a close-up to show what the problem is, describe if there are any issues, so if somebody's buying they know exactly what they're getting. But no, I do prefer having a bit of a rummage around in a charity shop.
Fiona, one thing people will be thinking about when they're trying to sell stuff, particularly online, is how do you protect yourself from being scammed?
Well, you need to look at what the platform rules are, first of all, in terms of if someone says an item didn't arrive, for instance. And this is one of the things that as a seller you do need to be very careful about. Make sure you've got the actual address, the postcode, the details, the person, and also send it registered or at least get a receipt from the post office, because that will protect you and provide you some proof that you've actually sent something from somebody saying it didn't arrive. I've had that happen to me when I've been selling vintage jewellery and items which are a little bit more expensive. You can also insure them as well, so you can insure your goods.
Does that mean it's better to sell particularly higher value items through a more formal selling website rather than just sticking it up on social media and selling it to whoever comes along and says yes?
I think it can give you peace of mind selling through a platform, because you've got some protection there. When you sell it literally peer-to-peer, so one individual to another, there is less protection for that. But you can still insure it through the post office if you're sending something. I mean, obviously, if you're handing something over to someone else, then the likelihood of being scammed is perhaps a bit less. But there's all the challenges then of arranging something and doing something face to face, which may be a little bit daunting. So, you know, what if this person doesn't like this item? What if you're on your own? You know, do you want someone coming to your house? Do you want someone knowing your address? So that there are a lot of pitfalls. And from a buyer's point of view, I think it is very much buyer beware. You need to see if the item actually looks, particularly if you're buying a more expensive item and a branded item, go online and check out. You need to do your research to make sure that the things that you are buying are genuine.
Now, as if Simon from earlier in the show hasn't confessed enough, here he is again, this time on regifting.
On another occasion, I got given a lovely gift from my neighbours when I moved into my new place about 18 months ago, and they gave me some very posh Italian biscotti biscuits, and I knew that the second I opened that box, there wasn't going to be any left in a very short space of time. Actually, they moved out shortly after someone else moved in, and I knocked on the same door and gave them the biscuits back to my new neighbours.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it, how many homes each posh tin of biscuits goes through before somebody finally snaps and opens them. Naomi, regifting, what do people need to bear in mind?
I have no issue with regifting either. I think you just need to be conscious of who gave you the gift in the first place, so you avoid regifting it back to the same people, because that could be a little bit embarrassing if they remember. But I think if you're going to do that, make sure that the item you've got, there's no tears on it, or it looks like it's being packaged up before or has sellotape left over on it. And if it's like a food item, be sure to keep an eye on the best before dates and things like that.
Absolutely on that. My producer, Smita, my Moneybox producer, was telling me that she had been given a gift that was 2 years out of date, a foodie gift. So that's not exactly ideal. Do you think that we all hate to think that our presents get regifted, but that secretly we all actually do it?
Well, I hope, I put a lot of thought into gifts that I give, so I genuinely hope people don't give them on, but it can happen for whatever reason, and I'm not going to be too distraught about it. I don't know, I might go and cry in a minute thinking about it, but no, it might be okay at that moment in time, but 6 months later they might not
Ahead,
use it anymore.
keep
So
left.
Things change and priorities change, so I don't have an issue with that.
I think the most important thing is to remember to be kind and to be gracious about these things.
So someone called Paul has tweeted to say, a younger family member gave an older one toiletries for Christmas in a box with 3 bottles. The following Christmas, the older family member gave the younger one the same box of toiletries with one of the bottles missing. Paul, what I do is I put post-it notes on anything I plan to regift, and that saves you the worries. Write the name on. Naomi, though, it is these sorts of kind of smelly soap sets or fancy biscuit tins. Those are the things that get regifted, aren't they? Do you think we'll have bought less of those kind of generic presents this year?
I think it will have done, because I think people are trying to be a bit more conscious about just buying stuff for the sake of buying stuff. Although it can fall on, it's the default present of, I don't know what to get somebody. Gift cards were potentially a bit of an issue because you don't know what's going to happen to the retailer.
After 800 yards, keep left.
But you can kind of, if you look in previous years and what happens in the Boxing Day sales, there's so much stuff left over that it almost looks like people are buying less.
Maybe you could even stock up at the Boxing Day sales for the following Christmas if that's the kind of gift you want to buy.
Absolutely.
Well, that is all that we have time for in this Moneybox programme. Many thanks to everybody who got in touch, especially those who got in touch with their Christmas present confessions. And thank you very much to our panel. You've been hearing from Dr. Fiona Ellis-Chadwick, retail expert at Loughborough University's School of Business, and also from Naomi Willis, who co-founded the Skint Dad Money Saving Blog. Thank you both very much. Now remember, it's the end of this show, but there is a whole year ahead, and at Moneybox we want to spend that year covering your stories. If there's a money issue that you want us to look at, then please do get in touch. You can email moneybox@bbc.co.uk, or you can find us on Twitter, where we tweet at Moneybox. On Wednesday at 3, Adam Shaw will be back with Moneybox Live. He'll be talking about consumer rights, which might be quite helpful if you are planning to return
After 800
so do
yards,
get in touch.
cross the
with questions
roundabout.
on that.
Second
In the meantime,
exit.
from me and from the whole Moneybox team, can I wish you a very happy 2022.
Moneybox was presented by Felicity Hanna. The producer was Smita Patel. Comedy in a moment here on Radio 4. Andy Zaltzman looks back at some of the notable news stories of 2021.
Well, he can't go through a red light, or is he?
Before that, Gabriel Gatehouse.
Cross the roundabout.
Tuesday.
Second exit.
This is a journey into the dark undergrowth of modern America.
He's going to try and
charting the path that led to the storming of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. last year.
I think I bear some responsibility for where we are today as a country.
From the conspiracy theories of the 1990s to the darkest corners of the internet.
People decided that the emblem of the board was going to be a swastika.
Did this all just happen?
He's got Tesla.
Or was it being coordinated?
My fellow Americans, the storm is upon us.
The Coming Storm with me, Gabriel Gatehouse, on Radio 4 and BBC Sound. Starts on Tuesday morning at 11.
I think they're together.
After the news at 1 o'clock, the BBC journalists will gaze into their crystal balls to predict what 2022 might have in store. That's at 10 past 1 this afternoon. First, Andy Zaltzman takes a look back at the highlights of 2021 with a compilation of the best bits of the last 12 months of news quizzing.
Hello and welcome to the official News Quiz decommissioning of the year 2021. In this, the News Quiz review of the year. I am Andy Zaltzman, and that is one of the few things of which I'm still relatively sure in this confusing world. 2021 has been a year that has seen this much criticised decade recover from its difficult first year, with a marginally less abominable difficult second year. But there have been definite signs of improvement, like there are definite signs of improvement on your second attempt at riding a horse. If the first one ended up with the horse flicking you over its head and volleying you into a sewage tank full of porcupines, and the second one merely involves the horse unseating you into a wheelie bin full of hedgehogs, then you're going to think, I'm learning. So, very slightly onwards and imperceptibly upwards we have gone, ever since the early episodes of the News Quiz year were dominated by news from the United States of America, where someone was not very happy about the employment boot being on the other fist from what he was used to, and being sacked from his job by 80 million voters. It's fair to say that Donald Trump and his many fans were somewhat triggered by the potent combination of democracy, mathematics, the US Constitution, due process, and the cold, wet
After 800 yards, cross the roundabout.
They took
Third
it
exit.
to themselves and wearing a furry hat and horns because, well, search not for logic in 2021, my friends. Logic checked out of Hotel Earth some time ago.
So, moving on now to question 1, and this goes to both teams. Who really, really, really does not want to move house?
Most men after 8 years of marriage.
Cross the roundabout. Third exit.
McDonald, would it?
Word correct, yes, that's the first point of the year.
Yeah, he hasn't taken it well, has he? I think it's fair to say.
A glorious understatement in this world of exaggeration.
Who'd have thought he'd be a sore loser? I mean, it really goes against everything we've learned
Take
about
the exit.
gentlemen over the last 4 years, hasn't it? It really does. I imagine that right now he's putting prawns and cream cheese behind every radiator in the White House. Sewing them into seams of the curtains.
Meanwhile, back here on the correct side of the Atlantic, after what had undoubtedly been a bit of a non-ideal 12 months, everything was going absolutely fine here on the island of Team GB for a day. COVID was vanquished, or might have been taking a breather and going home to his mum, as schools in England threw open their doors and welcomed in a new age of openness for 24 hours.
Question 1 this week is this. According to the government, what should happen as soon as possible?
April.
Right.
I've heard that the government wants April to happen as soon as possible because April's when we're going back to normal. And traditionally, at this time of year, April would be, 2 and a bit months away, I guess. But I've heard the government is setting up a task force to see if they can make April happen in a sort of shorter time frame. Right. So Matt Hancock, he's going to be ramping up the days of the week, and he's hopeful that within 10 days we'll be able to perhaps roll out Thursday or Monday, and then Tuesday by the previous Friday, thereby sort of making the weekend happen on Wednesday, and the February half term already in the past, which means it's downhill all the way.
To be honest, Hugo, I mean, I know that's not official yet, but that is the most coherent policy the government has yet come up with. Alan?
Apparently MPs are asking
After 800 yards, cross the roundabout. Second exit.
I have some suggestions.
Okay. Roll it.
Yeah, well, I think what we need, because the problem is not so much children going to school, it's children coming back from school, bringing disease. So I reckon, like, compulsory boarding school for everyone, teach children to teach other children, put them on an island, push it out to sea, whichever ones come back alive.
Cross the roundabout. Second exit.
Well, that was the original plan with Australia, I think, isn't it?
I feel sorry for parents that have to homeschool, but I don't feel bad for kids missing out on this much, because when I honestly reflected on what I did at primary school, the only things that stand out was every so often a dog would somehow get into the playground overnight on a sheep. And you just chase it around for a bit.
Did you say a dog or a sheep?
A dog or a sheep would get into the school, and there would be chaos, and that was the most exciting thing that happened.
In February, the government took a quick break from its hectic floundering
After
schedule to announce
800 yards, cross the roundabout. Second exit.
By all concerned, which brought us some crucial leeway so we could treat ourselves to a few nice helpings of complacency through the rest of the year. And some of the more Brexiteatious amongst us particularly enjoyed a little bit of schadenfreude, or what do we have to call it now after Brexit? Schadenfreude, that's it. Around headlines coming out of Europe that the continental vaccine rollout was not going quite as well as ours. Yes, get in. We were winning on so
Cross
many
the roundabout. Second exit.
And who would have thought that our vaccine success was all down to future former Health Secretary Matt Hancock's penchant for cinema?
It's been something of a triumph for Health Secretary Matt Hancock for the UK to have got this head start on the vaccine programme. But can you tell me what inspired Matt Hancock's vaccine strategy?
Oh, I know this one.
Yes, go on, Helen.
It is the 2011 film Contagion.
Correct.
Which he watched.
That is not a lie. Let me emphasise that is not a lie. We are making policy based on Hollywood blockbusters.
However, he did note that it was not his, quote, primary source of advice. It was another great 2011 film, Cowboys and Aliens.
After 800 yards, go left on the roundabout. First exit.
There was mounting evidence that the country, the world, and our species would never truly be the same again, when news broke that a farm in Lancashire had begun renting out goats to attend online Zoom meetings.
Before we move on from COVID issues, on the subject of COVID Zoom meetings, which Zoom
Go
guest
left on the roundabout.
justifiably claimed
First
the
exit.
greatest of all time?
That's the goat, isn't it?
It is the goat, yes, the goat.
These questions are easier when you give us the answer, I think. No, there's a farm. I was reading about this. There's a farm in this country that was struggling with whatever they normally do, and because of coronavirus, and they've been renting out goats for people to have as a member of their Zoom meeting, and it's £6 for 5 minutes or something like that. Listen, my concern is that I'm not saying that a website that rents out goats for 5 minutes at £6 a pop, you know, it can be an innocent thing, but what I want to know is why are you clicking that link in the first place? What's your motive?
I've got a good goat fact. They're not waterproof. Did you know that?